أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Okay, inshallah, so what I'm going to present today is a little bit about an overview of a course that I've been developing for some time. I've been presenting it to youth, children in the madrasa, but I've always thought about doing it for adults, and that's where we are today. This is now a course for spiritual development through the Qur'an, which is, I believe, the need of the hour right now with what's going on around the world, as we can see, and what has been going on for the last, 100 years. So the idea is to prepare us in the most important of areas of all, which is our spirituality, our ruhaniyat. Everything else, whatever we do to survive, to get through this world, to get through the life of this world, is down to individuals and so on. And it's important in itself. There is that material side of our existence, but ultimately it's the spiritual side that will get us through into the akhirah, and that will decide where we end up in the akhirah. So no matter how we are, who we are, what we are, where we are, this internal development is of the ultimate. So I thought, okay, so why not develop a course based upon the Quran for our shifa, for our development, for our spiritual rectification, which is the need of the hour. And this is what this course is about, inshallah. So as I go through it, it'll open itself up. I ask you, if you're going to ask questions, please leave the questions, put them in the chat box maybe, but ideally hold on to them. I'm going to go through this session, and then we'll for 40 minutes, and then we'll log out, log back in, and then you can have all your questions and so on dealt with at that time, inshallah. But at the moment, it'll be just a presentation here. If you can't hear, I'm not sure what the problem is. That we had a few people doing that, so I would advise you to log out and log back in. That would be the best thing if you can't hear. Okay. Just letting somebody know who's got that problem. Okay, I assume everybody else can hear, so inshallah, if there is any issue, just let me know. Okay, so let's begin. So the Quran curriculum is, it's vast, it's everything, and nothing short of that, to be honest with you. And I often feel, I'm not going to cover everything, but the idea is not to do it. The idea is to highlight things in the Quran, to open our minds, to open our eyes to how fantastic the Quran is, to be able to reach everybody, inshallah. I do a lot more of that, the knowledge base, with the students, with the children, because they love that. That's where they are. But for us as adults, we've kind of been there, done that. For us, it's more about life. It's about experiences we've had. It's about the hurt, the pains, the sacrifices, the commitments that we've experienced in our lives. And we are more attuned to the spirituality. We want sukoon, sakina, peace in our hearts. So that's not going to come about with the knowledge base, all the scientific miracles and so on. That's all well and good for the kids. But for us, we need something a little bit more above board than that. So that's where this course is designed for adults and reaches spirituality, spiritual understanding. And inshallah, I'm hoping that this will be something that will benefit everybody, inshallah. Okay, let's move forward from there. I'd like to ask everybody a question before we begin, just to get minds focused. What is the purpose of gaining knowledge or education? Right? What is the purpose of gaining knowledge or education? You can put the answer, what you think, in the chat. That will probably be the best at the moment. What do you think is the purpose of gaining knowledge or education? Okay, somebody's saying to get closer to Allah. Okay, good. Anybody else, any ideas? What is the purpose of knowledge? We send our kids to school and we get educated ourselves, knowledge and so on. So what is the purpose of that? Okay, we've got a couple of people. I think some people have probably been here before. That's why they're answering what they are saying. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so let's leave that for now. I'm going to come back to it. Bear this question in mind. What is the purpose of gaining knowledge or education? And let's have a look at this. What does the Quran say about knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. This is also the first revelation, which some of you will recognize, inshallah, and see what happens. Okay, somebody's just checking with me about the sound function. As far as I can see, okay, so translation. Read in the name of your Lord who created. This is the first revelation to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What you have to think about here is that for 600 years or so, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't spoken to mankind. What I mean by that is Isa alayhi salam, and the distance between Isa alayhi salam time-wise to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and that first revelation in the cave of Hira was about 600 years. So for 600 years there's been silence. Allah ta'ala has not spoken to, there was no prophet between the two. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not spoken to mankind. So after all that time, the first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if you like, is Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read in the name of your Lord. Read in the name of your Lord who created. Now he could have talked about Tawheed, he could have talked about, good and bad, halal and haram, all sorts of things. But he says this, read in the name of your Lord who created. So what do we learn from this? Right? Some lessons from this ayah. As human beings, we are encouraged to seek knowledge. Allah Ta'ala begins with Iqra, read. We are instructed to learn in the name of your Lord, i.e. all that we learn, everything that we should learn should be with the firm certainty that, one, the knowledge itself is from Allah Ta'ala, and two, the subject matter is a creation of Allah Ta'ala. So all the knowledge about a matter, about a thing, is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We didn't learn it from the university, the college, the school, etc., or YouTube for that matter. We learned it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who made it settle in our minds, in our hearts. And the subject matter of that knowledge is a creation of Allah ta'ala, whether it's our life forms, it's a solar system, the universe, whatever it is, whatever concept it is a creation of Allah Ta'ala. Time itself is a creation of Allah Ta'ala. Gravity is a creation of Allah Ta'ala, and so on and so forth. So in that respect, it helps us to understand what we are learning and to generate the awe of the Almighty, that everything around us is His creation. And whatever we're learning, that knowledge is from Him that settles in our mind. So you understand, we are responsible for nothing. We are capable of nothing. Everything is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So with this sort of understanding, we move forward and we get the answer that the reason why we educate, why we learn knowledge, is to make us more muttaqi, which means to be conscious of Allah Ta'ala. So an increase in knowledge should increase our taqwa. And that is fundamental, as you see in the Quranic course, because it is a fundamental aspect of the way to gain guidance, hidayah from the Quran itself, is to improve on and increase in our taqwa. And that taqwa is the consciousness of Allah Ta'ala. That wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you're conscious that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching, you're conscious that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there, you're conscious that you one day will stand before Him and have to answer for it. Okay, so in terms of this course, how do we proceed with this? Well, the first series of lessons that we have are centered on Surah Fatiha. That's where I begin. I begin with Surah Al-Fatiha, and from there we'll go forward. But the initial series of lessons, which may be 4 or 5 or a little bit more than that, will be centered on Surah Fatiha. Now, this surah is known as the mother of the book. That's one of its titles, the mother of the book. Why? Because meaning that it has in itself the whole of the Quran. The whole of the Quran is encapsulated, encompassed within Surah Al-Fatiha. Okay? All of that is encapsulated in Surah Al-Fatiha. That's what it means. Okay? Now, when we go further from this and understand the next thing, that it can be seen therefore as the summary of the Quran. Okay, so it encapsulates the Quran, contains the Quran, and is also a summary of the Quran. So if somebody wanted to sort of, when we pick up a book, we look at the blurb, we try to understand what's going to happen in the book, what is the book contain. We look at the blurb of the book. It's, in a sense, the Surah Fatiha is like that. It summarizes the entire Quran within ayat. We then study the opening of Surah Baqarah. So having done Surah Fatiha, we go to Surah Baqarah, but notice we only study the opening of Surah Baqarah. When I say the opening, the very opening, i.e. the first ayah or so. That's it, right? And the reason we do that is very important because Surah Fatiha is followed by Surah Baqarah. And when we do Surah Fatiha, you'll see the connection between the two surahs. They're very connected. It's interesting that you've got a very short surah, 7 ayat, 7 verses, and then you've got this incredibly big surah, the biggest surah in the Quran by far, right? It's probably one juz bigger than every other, all the other surahs. One juz bigger than all the others. So the surahs that come after are like 1 1/4, 1 1/2, and this one is like 2 1/2. All right. So this is the thing with this surah, that it's so amazing. And when you start to study, you'll see the amazement of it as we open it up, inshallah. But then we go into Surah Baqarah, and the first ayah is very important. It's crucial. No matter where you go in the Quran, what you study in the Quran, the first ayah of Surah Baqarah is important. Why? Because it contains the keys to guidance. The keys to guidance. Once you understand the opening ayah of Surah Baqarah, you're ready to go for the rest of the Quran, right? You're ready to go for the rest of the Quran. You won't get it just from having a quick look at it. You need to actually have it opened up to you, inshallah, which we'll do as we go to that point. But Surah Fatiha, we summarize the Quran, and then Surah Baqarah opening, and we look at the keys. Once we understand those keys, we all have to develop those keys. Okay, we all have to develop those keys within us. If we don't, this is where we find people study the Quran, read the Quran cover to cover, in English even, and come away with very little to benefit them. Some people are completely, bamboozled by it and say, I don't get it, it's very confusing. But others will read and say, yeah, it's okay, but that's all. It doesn't really make a change in them. Because the first subject, the first issue, which is the keys of the Quran, have not been taken on board. So this is very important. So we'll look at that. Thereafter, once we've done that, inshallah, we learn the conditions that we need to meet for guidance. And then we study individual surah from Juz Am. So Juz Am is what we call Ampara in Pakistan. So this is the last Juz. Juz means Sipara. And Amma Yatasa'alun, the first surah of the last juz. So we study that, and where we go and begin is right at the back of the Quran. And I don't like to use these terms, end of, back of, beginning of the Quran, because to be honest with you, and we'll learn this as we go along, the Quran, there is no beginning and there is no end. So there's no first surah and last surah. There's no such thing. People who use those terms, it's not correct to do that. Technically, it's not correct in the sense of the Quran. But the reason I use that here now is just to give you a sense of where we're going to begin and where we're going to end. So we start with Surah Qul A'udhu bi Rabbin Nas, which is the last surah in the Quran as you see it in book format. And then we work from there onwards towards the bigger surahs. And so inshallah, you'll see how it goes. And the reason we do that is because a short surah allows us to complete a number of lessons within a number of time so that you can see some kind of stop, start, all right? And also it allows for you to understand and appreciate the greatness of each surah. Because if we do long surahs, it's going to take a long time. But if you should do short surahs, because they can be completed in a relatively short amount of time, you'll be able to see the greatness of each surah. And that in itself is part of the amazement of the Quran, inshallah. Okay, we have a starter activity normally. We begin usually with a question that is related to the central theme of the surah. So that's how the lessons will be done. I do this with the madrasa classes as well. Alhamdulillah, they find it beneficial. And I know that in schools they have this as well. So, it's something that they've taken from the Sunnah really, because the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to do this. So this question is given for discussion to focus our minds on the central theme of the surah before beginning the in-depth study. So I'll throw a question out, and it's just to focus our minds on the central theme of the surah. So that's what it does. And why, as I say, it's a practice of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He would often do this. In various hadith, you'll find Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam starts by saying, does anybody know such and such, or has anybody seen such and such, or is anybody aware of such and such? And the Sahaba Ikram, out of their humility and their adab, would say, Allah and His Rasul know best. And then he would then take them through the lesson of the hadith, which was then that initial question was actually a central theme to that hadith. So it's a practice of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's why I will continue it on this course, inshallah. The next thing we do now, after we've seen the surah itself, is we go through the tajweed of the surah. Now, when we go through the tajweed of the surah, it doesn't mean that we're going to take, weeks or hours on that. We're not. It's not like that. What we're going to do with each surah, we look at something that's actually prominent in that surah with respect to tajweed. Okay, we look at something that's prominent within that surah. So it'll be one particular rule of tajweed that we'll highlight. So what will happen is with each surah, because there's a different rule, slowly, inshallah, it'll build up your tajweed knowledge. Okay, that's what it will do. All right. So those who do not know tajweed, they'll build up slowly over time with each surah a little bit about tajweed. Those who do know it, it just allows revision for those who do know it. Okay. The next thing we look at then is the translation of the surah itself. Okay, the meaning of the surah in English. All right, we'll do it in English, and because obviously it's best just stick to one language, and that's what I'm going to do it in. And we get a general understanding of the surah going through the English translation, inshallah. When we do that, then you get an overview of the surah. The next thing we'll do is there usually is a hadith to do with each surah. There are more than one hadith, but we will take at least one that is relevant to that surah. So for each surah we study a relevant hadith. It allows the study of hadith, therefore, in each series of lessons. And particular points of the hadith may also be highlighted as part of the hadith studies. This is important because what that allows is that encapsulation of hadith with the Qur'an as well. And I think that really boosts the spiritual growth, inshallah, within the lessons as we go along. And that's important. I want to sort of maximize by getting the hadith within the Qur'an as well, where it's relevant. Obviously, there will be issues outside of the Qur'an that are in the hadith, and I'll be going through those as well, inshallah. So hopefully, with the combination of the two, I'm hoping that there will be a lot of, inshallah, moral and spiritual development in the lessons. Next, we look at the language, right? We study the language and style of the surah. This, again, we've done with the English translation. It develops our grasp of language, style, and underlying themes and meanings of the surah. So we're still looking at it in depth. We're just looking at it in terms of, like they do in school, in an English literature or language lesson. We'll be doing that sort of thing, right? To appreciate how Allah Ta'ala has put this surah together, how the language is so, subhanAllah, it's a mu'jiza, it's a miracle. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about that. So this is, we're really whetting our appetite here, not even getting into the surah in depth, but just looking at the miraculous border issues of each surah, inshallah. Then we now go into ayah by ayah, okay? From here onwards, we focus on each individual ayah, okay? And when we do that, subjects and topics that are related to the ayah are touched upon and presented, right? So you'll find that, that this is where it becomes, especially for the kids, because I tend to go a lot more into the subject knowledge than I will with you lot, but it does develop our subject knowledge, and I will still be touching on it here as well. But then they get assignments, they get homework on biology, on history, on other aspects of science, and it tends to connect with with their schoolwork. So Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4 is the sort of level we do it at, and they find it very useful. In fact, what it does for them, and that's the important thing here, it makes them appreciate the Qur'an. Okay, it makes them appreciate the Qur'an, because they realize, oh my God, I didn't know this was in the Quran, right? As far as they're concerned, it's just surah and sabak and whatever. But when they see this, then alhamdulillah, it amazes them. And then bringing that up to us, yeah, it does the same thing for us as well. There's so much I've learned. It's amazing. I'm just, amazed by the Quran, subhanAllah. Why shouldn't we be? It is the kalam, the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He is the creator of everything in the universe. So, we have human beings who are, they're experts in, let's take, for example, the doctor. The doctor is an expert in the human body. But there are times when you'll go to him and say, I can't deal with this. You have something wrong with your lungs, for example. I'm going to have to send you to a lung specialist. So now this is somebody who's studied, the doctor. He studied so many years of his life, 6-7 years of his life at university, at that level of knowledge that of the human body. And yet he will say at a certain point, I can't deal with this. I need to send you to somebody who's an expert on just this one organ of the body, the lung. So then you go to the lung specialist, and what has the lung specialist done? The lung specialist, apart from what the doctors have studied, because they do similar courses to begin with, has then gone off and specialized in the lungs. And he's spent 4 or 5 years just focusing on the lungs. And that's his lifetime accomplishment. And you think, subhanAllah, if one organ of the body, and there's entire faculties in universities that are teaching just about this one thing. There's professors of the lungs and so on, how they work. That's incredible. That's incredible. Then there's eye specialists, ear specialists, skin specialists, and so on and so on and so on. For every organ of the body, there's a specialist. That's amazing. And even if you ask that specialist, do you know everything there is to know about the lungs? He will say, no, I don't. I don't know everything. We're just at the edge of research at the moment, and there's more things coming on. And we'll know much more about the lungs in 5 years or 10 years than we know today. Subhanallah. And that's the thing with each ayah. Each ayah from Allah Ta'ala, when it talks about something, there's immense scope in it, but we'll just touch upon things, inshallah, just to give us an appreciation. And as it develops our subject knowledge. As different subjects turn up from ayah to ayah, and even within each word of an ayah, you will come to know the variety and breadth of subjects covered in a single ayah. So you'll see even in a single ayah, and then not just it's the particular words, individual words of Allah Ta'ala that in itself encapsulate an entire subject, an entire area of human endeavor. So it's amazing. And when the Quran is put to us like this, then yeah, subhanallah, it touches our hearts. It absolutely challenges our minds, and you start to get a new awareness of the Quran. And that's what I hope to do here as well to some extent. Then when we've done all this, now we've looked at the surah, we've looked at its English meaning, we've looked at its context, we've looked at the traditional tafsir of it, we've looked at this connection with science, technology, history, geography, psychology, philosophy, whatever. Then we go back again to the beginning of the surah, and now we look at the whole thing in a whole new light, right? That whole new light is now personal relevance. Okay, we go through the surah again, ayah by ayah, and we look at the personal relevance of that surah or individual ayat to us as individuals. So having completed the traditional understanding of the whole surah, we now turn to its relevance to you as an individual. And the personal lessons from each ayah that are there are now studied and explained. Okay, that's important. That's where your development now comes in. Further on to that, we look at linguistic and other miracles of the Quran. You see, the Quran, its true or original miracle wasn't what we do today. Today, people are talking about science in the Quran, space in the Quran, and history and so on, which is fine. That's good. That's fine. That's not an issue. But my point here is a question would arise. How did the Sahaba prove the miraculous nature of the Quran in their day and age, 1400 years ago, in the desert, without being able to read or write, and obviously having definitely no access to scientific or historical books and so on? Most of them couldn't even read or write. How did they present the Quran as a miracle? Well, simple. Linguistics, the language of the Quran. That was its original, and still is today, its greatest attribute, the linguistics. The language of the Quran is what made it become so amazing. The language of the Quran. And in that day and age, the people who were there, the Quraysh, were masters in language as well. They were master poets and master grammarians. So they knew the language inside out. And what actually really bamboozled them was, how did this person, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who's never been to school, cannot read or write, can't even write his own name, how in the world is he just sitting there and just emitting these verses, sentences to them of immaculate nature? They were just immaculate grammatically and poetically. How is he doing that? Normally for them, they would have to sit down, write it, rewrite it, edit it, proofread it, etc. The usual process. He wasn't doing that. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was just sitting there and just saying it for the first time, no repetition, no preparation. And it was amazing. They recognized its linguistic excellence. So this was how they proved that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was beyond, what he was getting was beyond human beings' capability, that it was truly a divine revelation. So, subhanAllah. So what I'm going to do is go through a little bit of that for you to understand its linguistic excellence. We also look at other related miracles, obviously scientific and so on. We'll touch upon those as we go along. In terms of along the course, there'll be questions. It's kind of like a continuous assessment. So there'll be questions relevant to the ayah throughout the lessons to increase our ta'aleem, our knowledge. So you'll find I'll put out questions, and you'll see those questions, and we may discuss them. But the thing is, it's for you guys to sort of have a look at that and maybe take it further if you want to. There'll also be reflective questions, and that's for spiritual development. All right. So there are two types of questions. One is just pure academic, and that'll be put out, and you'll see its relevance. And you can chase that up and answer it, inshallah. And then there'll be reflective questions to which there is no right or wrong answer. There is just your answer. Okay, there's just your answer. We'll look at that a bit more, inshallah, as we go along. So those are the two types of questions that you'll find along the course. Then we have tarbiyah. Okay, the tarbiyah is going to be discovering any practice that you can bring about in your daily lives or generally. Okay, so we go through the surah, and if there's something in the surah, and sometimes it's the entire surah itself, right, that you can recite at night or morning or something like that, and it does particular things for you, then I'll point that out to you, inshallah. What does that do? It helps to cultivate iman. And the practice in the student is following the study of the surah. It helps to, improve your iman, and it's tarbiyah for you. Okay, you're taking a part of the Quran, like the Sahaba Ikram. When they looked at the surah, they didn't just learn it by just reading it or memorizing it. They went out and practiced it. If there's something to practice in it, they practice it. And this helped them to develop their connection to the Quran and their tarbiyah itself, inshallah. So this is also from the adab of studying the word of Allah as well, that you don't just listen to it, read it, memorize it. No, you go out and you practice it. If there's an injunction in there, if there's a commandment in there especially, you go out and you practice it. You're liable for that from that moment on, you see. That's why. Okay. Then we have tazkiyah, and that's the final part of it, tazkiyah. Tazkiyah is we review the whole surah in a spiritual context. And what that means is that the whole surah is now presented to you as a communication from Allah Ta'ala to you to reflect upon in respect of your own relationship with your Creator. So we do that now. We take the whole surah and we present it again, but this time it was slightly widely worded, more words to it, and put more smoothly to you, if you like, in language, so that it's like a communication from Allah to you. And we kind of we'll look at that, we'll reflect upon that, and we'll discuss that, inshallah. So we look at the surah again in three ways. One, traditional understanding, classical understanding. Two, relevance to you in this day and age. And three, the spiritual part of the surah, how looking at it in the sense that Allah's communicating His words to me in this surah. Okay, and that's your tazkiyah. Okay, why ta'aleem, tarbiyah, and tazkiyah? These three words that keep coming up here. I'm going to explain that now, inshallah. From the Qur'an. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربنا وبعث فيهم رسولا منهم ويتلو عليهم آياتك ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة ويزكيهم. This is the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when he's built the Kaaba. He's saying, Ya Allah, in the offsprings of my son Ismail alayhi salam, let there be a prophet who will come, who will do what? He will علمهم الكتاب والحكمة ويزكيهم. He will teach them the book and the hikmah and the wisdom. Okay, so the first thing is this ayah and looking at what it means. So Ibrahim alayhi salam says to Allah Ta'ala, raise up amongst them a messenger who will recite to them your verses, يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِكَ, and will teach the book and the wisdom and purify them. Three things: teach the book, wisdom, and purify them. So يُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ ta'aleem, knowledge. يُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ, teach them the book, right? The knowledge of the book that comes from the book. So that's ta'aleem, knowledge. Wal-hikmah, the hikmah is the wisdom, and that wisdom, the scholars have said, is the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when you do the sunnah is something you do. The ta'aleem is something you learn. The sunnah is something you do, obviously connected to and based upon the ta'aleem. And when you practice something, it develops you. There's your tarbiyah. It develops you. And then وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, zakihim, and you purify them. Tazkiyah, purification of the soul. But this is stage by stage. First, you have to have the knowledge. It's got to be sound knowledge. Then you've got to practice that knowledge, and that's the sunnah, and you develop your tarbiyah. Now you're ready for spiritual purification, and you then reach that maqam, that status. So that's how it works, and that's where the three are connected. I've spoken to ulama up and down the country about this, and alhamdulillah, everybody's in complete agreement. This is the purpose, and this is how the Quran should be taught. I know it's not taught like this. You're either doing, mostly it's done, the first part, you allimuhum al-kitaba. People teach the Quran by, the tafsir or just reading or memorizing, that's it. Hikmah, the sunnah, is taken as a separate entity, and, let's practice this sunnah and that sunnah, but the two should be connected. And thirdly, tazkiyah. Well, we have some very bad practices of tazkiyah, which, taken by people who are doing sort of just spirituality or whatever. But in actual fact, you're not supposed to do spirituality without knowledge, and you're not supposed to do knowledge without spirituality. You find people who are just into knowledge, they just go to courses for tajweed, tawheed, Arabic grammar, this and that. They become quite arrogant. Develops arrogance in you because there's no tazkiyah, there's no soul purification. Whereas people who do soul purification, right, they don't have the knowledge, then they go astray. They start do bid'ah type practices. So you need both. And once both are together with the sunnah in the middle, then alhamdulillah, that's complete. And that's what I'm trying to do with this course, with the children's course in the madrasa, and with the adults course, inshallah. So the method of presentation is, I'll be using PowerPoint to present the series of lessons. I'll be using Zoom as a medium to deliver the lessons, and I'll be delivering one session per week, inshallah. Usually it'll be on Friday about this time, inshallah. That's how it'll be done. As for the adab of lessons, you have to bear this in mind. These lessons are study of the Quran and require specific adab. Okay. Firstly, we should sit where we will not be disturbed or distracted. We should also wear proper libas as if we are in a madrasa. So I expect people to be in, thobe or hijab or whatever, inshallah. It's just your adab towards Allah Ta'ala's kitab. We should make wudu for the lesson as well, where it's practical and possible to do. Don't forget, remember, ideally we would be in the masjid doing this, and that's what I wanted to be, but it can't be because of the lockdowns and all this stuff, which is not going to end. So we are doing this from home, but you show your adab to Allah by sitting at home in that manner, so you become mentally and physically attuned to the lessons, inshallah. Further to that, I'll be using various sources, which includes materials from scholars of the past and present. Now, we are here to learn ultimately from Allah Ta'ala. So he's the ultimate teacher, not me, not anybody else. And I want no bias or prejudice should be shown to any individual. There's scholars I'll mention, scholars sometimes I won't, because sometimes we're not ready for that. But we live in a world of bias and prejudice, and I don't want that. We take from the best of what a person has said. We leave out the person and the personality, okay? And further, I will not engage in debate. If you disagree with something or you know about something better, alhamdulillah, may Allah Ta'ala bless you with more. I'm not here for that. I'm not argumentative. I'm just sharing what Allah Ta'ala has given to me to know, to benefit you, inshallah, because it's benefited me and I want to benefit you. Because you should want for your brother or your sister what you want for yourself. Resources that you probably need is you need to get a ring binder or a folder to keep your study sheets in, a writing pad, something for note taking. Writing things down, you see, is an adab of the lesson. And it also will help you to learn the subject matter better, okay? So writing things is important, it's an adab, all right? Typical subjects we'll cover, I've mentioned some of them already: hadith, tafsir, tajweed, surat al-Nabi, Quranic linguistics, Quran miracles, tarbiyah, and tazkiyah, inshallah. Further to that, other subjects we'll touch on as well as tawheed, as akhirah, fiqh, eschatology as well, I'm gonna bring that in, character building, marriage and family, society, science, English, history, and so on. We'll be touching on various things at various times, inshallah. It's a whole scope of things, but these are some of the key ones that I'll be dealing with, inshallah. Your level of engagement, you can simply listen in and interact in answering questions and being involved in brief discussions. Or you can go further and you can maintain a diary of self-development, which is very good to do. And that contains your thoughts and reflections, and you can do that during the course of the lesson, and of course the thoughts that come to your mind between each lesson over the week. And that will be your diary, which you keep and you look over and develop yourself. Or you can go further than that and have more academic involvement by answering the set questions and sending them to me for marking, and I'll have a look at them for you, inshallah. And that's fine, I can do that for you as well. So that's more of an involvement. What are the costs? Sometimes people ask. Well, there's no charge for the course lessons, but I would appreciate any donations. It's a reality. This is my life. I've given up everything else. I don't do anything else. I work from home. I live at home, and that's it. I disassociate from myself from the world outside there. I will not work in firms and industries and things like that run by non-Muslims, where you're seeing women in skirts and blouses and things, and all these haram elements that are there. And Christmas time, I've come away from that. I've been away from it for 10, 15 years, because none of that is helpful. Those things destroy your spirituality. Okay, when you look on something haram, that's it. It takes away something from your spirituality, from your nobility. So I stay away from that. And you'll find all spiritual people do that. They're hiding away in caves and things like that. Very difficult to find. So, but me being in the middle of a city center, the best thing you can do, as Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam advised, well, stay in your homes. In a time of fitna, stay in your homes. And we are in a time of fitna like never before. So donations are helpful, alhamdulillah, because, that would help me, to keep things going, inshallah, feed the family. It's a reality. But, I'm not fixing anything. It's up to you. If you can, alhamdulillah. If you can't, okay, alhamdulillah. Your du'as will be appreciated even more. But those who need to, my bank details are, my name will be Latif on the bank account. It's an HSBC account, sort code 401101, account number 213700901. And if you're going to do something like that, please put a reference Qur'an so I know it's from the course, inshallah. Anybody needs my email, it's mlatifms@yahoo.co.uk. Okay, so those are the details if you need them, inshallah, for donations at any time that you want to. Then I'd appreciate that. And my email is there for people who want to sort of send work in, or even if you want to send your diary in, I'll have a look at that, or your reflections or something. Alhamdulillah, you're welcome to do that, because that's a part of adab as well. When you learn, you kind of interact with your ustad, you have that reflections on things, so you know that you're doing well, because this is not like a fixed course like in the West. Those fixed courses, there's a whole story behind that anyway, but that's not proper learning. Learning is to define and refine character, and define and refine your tarbiyah, and define and refine your spirituality, and that is a different way of doing it. People, as you saw with this example of the Sahaba Ikram, they referred to Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It wasn't a case of marks and tests and assessments and things like that. It wasn't like that. It was very much something beyond that, and that's how I want to run this course. I want to run it as close to Sunnah methodology as possible, inshallah. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop there and ask for any questions from any of you guys, inshallah. You're welcome to ask. As I said, we have a 40-minute slot, so I'm going to log out. I want everybody to log out, and then you can log back in if you have questions, and feel free to do that. And inshallah, I'll answer everything that I can as best I can as we go through that. So Jazakallah khairan for your attendance, and I'll see you in a minute or so after we log in again, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. We'll just log out and log back in, inshallah, for those who want to ask questions, inshallah. You'll have to take everything on the chat again, inshallah, if anybody's put questions there. Jazakallah khair.